Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's discussion, Advancing the OpenCourseWare Movement, Challenges and Achievements. My name is Steve Carson. I'm External Relations Director for MIT OpenCourseWare, and I'm joined today by two leaders of the OpenCourseWare movement, Professor Shigeru Miyagawa, who was one of the original committee members who first proposed MIT OpenCourseWare, and is currently the chair of the MIT OpenCourseWare Faculty Advisory Committee. He's also the chair of MIT's Foreign Languages and Literatures Department. I'm also joined by Mary Lou Forward, who is the executive director of the OpenCourseWare Consortium and previously managed student programs in Africa for SIT International. So thank you both for joining us today. Let me take a few minutes to set the stage for the discussion. On April 4th, 2011, we're going to celebrate the 10th anniversary of MIT OpenCourseWare, which was announced on the front page of the New York Times on that date in 2001. The article announced MIT's plans to publish the core academic materials, the syllabi, lecture notes, quizzes, and exams from all of MIT's courses. And the impact of this simple yet far-reaching idea is becoming more widely recognized over time. But let me just give you a few highlights of what we've achieved in the past 10 years. To date, we have 2,000 courses of material on the MIT OpenCourseWare site, and these materials have been visited more than 100 million times by people from virtually every country and region on the planet. Over 800 translations of OCW materials have been made in a range of different languages, including Chinese, Spanish, Portuguese, Thai, and Persian. More than 250 copies of the site have been distributed by request to universities in bandwidth-constrained regions, primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. And more than 200 universities worldwide have joined MIT in openly sharing educational content on the web using the OpenCourseWare model. Together, these universities now share materials from more than 13,000 courses taught in their classrooms. In addition to that, OpenCourseWare and the Open Educational Resources movement have now become part of the discussion at the U.S. Department of Education as they plan for transformation in education here in the United States, and have become part of the conversation at ministries of education around the world. So although it was a simple idea that came out of a small faculty committee, it's had far-reaching impact to date. And we're looking forward to the next 10 years of OpenCourseWare. So first, what I'd like to do is ask you, Professor Miyagawa, to take us back to 2001 to that committee and talk a little bit about the atmosphere around online learning, what it was like at the time, what influenced the committee's thinking in terms of making the proposal that they made.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. So I'm Shigeru Miyagawa. I chair the MIT OpenCourseWare Faculty Advisory Committee, and I also had the fortunate role of being on the committee that proposed OpenCourseWare. Let me begin, though, by thanking you for your interest and support in MIT OpenCourseWare. MIT OpenCourseWare is an MIT community effort. You know, we all pitch in. We have huge participation from the faculty and other teaching staff and beyond. And with your interest and support, you are very much part of the community. And so on behalf of the faculty, I thank you. The story of OpenCourseWare begins in year 2000 when then president of MIT, Charles Vest, called together a committee to think about what MIT can do in this new emerging field of e-learning. We were reading about e-learning almost on a daily basis. Okay? This was 10 years ago. It was still the dot-com era. And we were reading in the newspaper of another successful IPO, this and that, and e-learning was very much in that space. MIT was not engaged in e-learning, and the president was concerned that we should be in that space, and to be in that space as a leader, as MIT should be. Okay? And so what the committee did, none of us were experts in e-learning. And so what we had to do was to learn about e-learning. And so one of the first things we did was to do a study of the e-learning ventures that were going on around the country. And that was a very big learning process. And we enjoyed it. We still have that report. It was part of the report that we finally gave to President Vest. And we were told at the time that it was the thickest report ever turned in by an MIT committee. And so we did our due diligence to come to that decision. As part of the process in making the decision, we really did study the landscape of e-learning to see what it is that MIT could do that could, in our own way, take leadership in the space.
Great. So what forces compelled the committee to decide against doing a traditional distance learning program? Certainly that was one of the things that you had considered.
Yeah, in fact, going in, because of the .com atmosphere, the assumption was that we would create some kind of a for-profit organization, an MIT.com, if you will. The studies that we engaged in, we did with the assumption that we will try to come up with a business model that would make it feasible and viable and credible for MIT to take some leadership position in this for-profit landscape. But as we looked into the matter, there are a couple of things that became apparent, which ultimately led us to the decision to do OpenCourseWare. One was that in looking at all of these organizations that were engaged in for-profit ventures in e-learning, it was apparent to us that this is a very, very tough area to do business in. To take teaching materials and sell it is something that seemed at first to be a pretty obvious thing to do, but as we looked at the cost versus the revenue, it was not so apparent that it would be a wonderful model. And so that was a big question mark. A second thing that we did was to really think for ourselves as faculty members, should we as faculty members create teaching materials which are for our students, which will also be sold out in the market? And we started to feel uncomfortable with that concept, the idea that we would take our teaching materials, which we tie to education, and then somehow link it to some kind of monetary value. And ultimately, we decided, given these two issues, that MIT, yes, should be in this space, and we should take leadership, but we should create a new model, not a for-profit.com model, but to really take advantage of this wide open space that the internet was making available to us. And so the idea that we came up with was to take what we have and simply give it away. Give it away for free, openly, to anyone who wants to use it.
Great. So tell me a little bit about who the committee originally believed was going to benefit from making these materials widely available, and how has that changed, or how has the usage of the site surprised you over time?
Well, there's been so many surprises since we made the decision. We have been stunned and so pleased at the huge numbers of people who are using OCW. Something like 1 million people come and view MIT OCW material on a monthly basis. That's just beyond our wildest dreams. When we first made this decision to offer our courseware for free and openly, we had hoped that it would benefit some people out there who might be interested in learning something that they were interested in. And possibly those in third world countries who didn't have access to education and to teaching materials that they could benefit. Okay, and that's happening, and that's all happening. And it's happening in huge numbers. We show this map of the world and the access rate from each part, and we see that people are coming literally from all over the world. And actually, Mary Lou is the person who is in charge of the global OCW Consortium, And so it's not just that people are coming to see MIT OpenCourseWare, but that other schools are launching their own OpenCourseWare. And so that was our hope, and that expectation is certainly being met, and met beyond our wildest expectations.
Yeah, I know from reading some of the documents from the early days of the program that the committee early on and the people who were developing the first stages of the program were very, very interested in seeing other schools adopt this model as well. They felt that there would be benefit from MIT in sharing its materials, but that this idea of OpenCourseWare wouldn't truly be transformative for education unless other schools around the world were sharing their materials, and MIT had the opportunity to learn from them as well. So you were also very involved in some of the early efforts to bring other schools on board with sharing their content. Would you share a little bit about those activities and that piece of the OCW story?
Sure. Now, in terms of what the committee proposed to the president, we actually proposed a couple things. The one that everyone knows about is the idea of launching OCW at MIT. But as Steve said, we also believe that if this is successful and that MIT is able to build this OCW model, that it would not be enough for just MIT to do that, because we were truly introducing a new model into the internet space of a major institution, educational institution, offering its teaching materials for free and openly. And we felt very strongly that in order for this model to succeed and to have the kind of impact that we felt they could have, that we had to reach out to other institutions around the world and encourage them to adopt the same model. We started building MIT OpenCourseWare in 2001. In 2005, we invited a number of people from other institutions, both in the US and also in Europe and Asia, to MIT to begin the process of creating a global OpenCourseWare presence. That was in 2005. There were maybe 12 or 15 schools at that time. And as Mary Lou can tell you later, we are now well above 200 institutions, many of them representing some of the top schools in their respective countries.
Great. Mary Lou, why don't you pick up the story from there and tell us a little bit more about adoption worldwide of the OpenCourseWare concept, where schools have emerged sharing their content, and also how the consortium itself developed.
Mm-hmm. From that meeting in 2005, where, as Shigeru mentioned, there were about 12 universities, the interest in OCW increased dramatically. And over the next few years, the consortium really began to take off to the point where the decision was made to form the consortium as a separate entity. So that happened about 2 years ago, and we've seen membership growing since then in regions all over the world. Actually, our current membership is around 240. Institutions worldwide, and that is equally divided between South America, Europe, Asia, and North America. And we're beginning to see this year a lot more increased interest from Africa, which is fabulous, and we're happy to see participation from all parts of the world. At the moment, there are just over 13,000 courses that are being produced, and if you think of MIT's portion of that at 2,000, you can see that schools have really embraced this concept and contributed greatly to the worldwide body of OpenCourseWare.
Great. Talk about the goals of the OpenCourseWare Consortium. Why does the consortium exist? What is it set up to do?
The consortium's mission is to empower formal and informal learning through the sharing of high-quality open educational materials. And this is part of a larger vision to ensure equal access to high-quality post-secondary education for people around the world who may not necessarily have that access right now. So the consortium works differently than other organizations in this space by making sure that the courses are put up with pedagogical information. So it's an entire package of materials that allows students, self-learners, and faculty members to see not just what the content is, but how it's constructed to facilitate learning.
Great. Talk a little bit about why a school would want to start an OpenCourseWare. Obviously, we've seen tremendous adoption of the concept, and there's a lot of interest in it. But what's in it for the schools that are sharing their content besides the philanthropic aspect of helping people?
Mm-hmm. We've seen certainly that there have been a lot of benefits, I think, that probably weren't originally envisioned by the faculty committee at MIT. For one thing, it actually raises the profile of institutions, and where it may feel a bit contrary to the idea of giving something away, it actually helps students see what they would get by coming to the institution. So that level of transparency has been really important for prospective students to decide where to go to school. It's also helped students in many institutions around the world support their own learning. So if a student is perhaps struggling with a concept, they can see how it's presented at another institution, and that actually benefits the home institution by having students that understand things better and have it be stronger. So to participate in this global movement is critical. It's also helping the institution be known for its specialties. So we have some institutions, for example, the University of Technology in Delft in the Netherlands, that has put up their water management curriculum. And if you are on a search engine, just a general search for water management information, their courses come up. And they are getting well known around the world and being contacted by other institutions and by agencies to help them figure out how to create their own water management materials or help with consulting. So there have been all kinds of really interesting and unexpected effects of OpenCourseWare.
Great. So, it's certainly an extraordinary story, the amount of interest that this idea has generated and the amount of activity this idea has generated in the past 10 years. And I'll come back to Professor Miyagawa in a minute with a similar question about MIT OpenCourseWare. But more broadly, what do you see on the horizon, Mary Lou, for the OpenCourseWare movement? What's coming in the next 10 years?
It's actually a really exciting time. You mentioned earlier that the concept has grown. It's grown to the point where it's actually getting attention at the governmental level. So we're seeing around the world different governments beginning to embrace the idea of open education. And OpenCourseWare is synonymous with open education. So when people are talking about open educational resources and OpenCourseWare, they tend to use those interchangeably, which is a testament to how powerful this idea is and how wide the adoption has become. For example, in Brazil, they held a congressional hearing not very long ago, back in August, about how open educational resources could support Brazilian goals in education, in their higher education and secondary educational systems. We're seeing in Korea, for example, that the program for excellence that's given out to institutions of higher education to improve their teaching and learning has an OpenCourseWare requirement, so that any recipient of this grant must take the materials they develop and put it back into the OpenCourseWare space. We're also seeing governments such as the state of Washington in the US and New Zealand adopting openness policies so that any institution that receives government funding makes their materials openly available, and this includes OpenCourseWare and open education. So we're seeing, I think, in the next 5 years, more of this happening, and as this happens, more people will know about it, and the real potential of OpenCourseWare to help support improvements in teaching and learning is going to be realized.
Great, thank you. So I think it's apparent, at least to me, that MIT OpenCourseWare as a project now is in some sense a victim of its own success, where before we had an open field to be the innovator, we are now surrounded by universities around the world who are sharing their content in new and innovative ways. Governments are getting into the act. We've got foundations basing some of their programs around open educational resources and OpenCourseWare. And that presents a challenge for MIT OpenCourseWare in remaining an innovative leader in the open education space. And so, Professor Miyagawa, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about future directions you see for the MIT OpenCourseWare project.
Well, I'm very, very optimistic about the future of MIT OpenCourseWare. Next year, 2011, we're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary of the start of MIT OpenCourseWare, which, as Steve mentioned earlier, was announced in year 2001. And one of the things that has been a huge surprise and a very pleasant surprise is the fact that so many MIT faculty have participated in OpenCourseWare. this was not something that we were certain of because it was strictly on voluntary basis, and it still is, that you put your material on OpenCourseWare as an MIT faculty. And it took a while for the momentum to build, but once the momentum built, within a few years into building OpenCourseWare, we now have 80% of MIT faculty members who are participating in OpenCourseWare. That's just remarkable. And it really is an indication, I think, of this MIT community and its commitment to helping the world and its commitment to values of openness. It really has caught on. I still remember a junior faculty member here at MIT telling me shortly after OpenCourseWare was announced that the day that MIT announced OpenCourseWare was the proudest day of his career at MIT, and I remember that, And so that kind of commitment is there. It's getting stronger, and so as we look to the next 10 years, we can look for, I think, many, many exciting things to come out of MIT OpenCourseWare. So one thing that we're starting to see now, which is very, very interesting and exciting, is that we now know that about half of the people who are looking at MIT OpenCourseWare are self-learners. Okay? Those are people who are interested in some topic, whatever the topic may be, and they find something on MIT OpenCourseWare and they drill down into it. Now, MIT OpenCourseWare is a set of teaching materials that faculty members have provided. Those teaching materials are designed for students. They're not designed for the self-learners out in the world. Sometimes the course is complete and a self-learner can come in and study physics or math. Okay? But what we're doing now with some of the courses is to enhance the content so that we can enhance the experience of these self-learners. And so now we're going a little bit beyond MIT OpenCourseWare as it was originally envisioned as MIT OpenCourseWare, and adding material for the people who are out there in the world accessing this content to study.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So I think what we'll do now is turn our attention to some of the questions we received from some of our viewers in the lead up to this webcast. And Mary Lou, I'm going to ask you to respond to this first question, which comes from Kristamurthy Ramapriya, who would like to know if there are any business companies out there that provide courses in the OCW manner and are free of cost, and perhaps if any of them have certification options associated with them.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing, I would say, a greater interest from business in OpenCourseWare. I think originally businesses were looking at OpenCourseWare as a way for them to perhaps train their employees in areas that they may not have received education in previously. For example, we've been talking with the Small Business Administration, and they're very interested in using OpenCourseWare as a way to help educate the small business community in the United States about business, and to offer OpenCourseWare, an OpenCourseWare channel on the Small Business Administration site. So we are, I think, seeing businesses become more interested in that. At the moment, I don't know of any businesses that have taken their own internal training materials and turned them into OpenCourseWare. Mm-hmm. We hope that that's going to happen, because that would again be a good contribution, particularly to job skills training and workforce preparation.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. And of course, the OpenCourseWare Consortium has, as part of its membership, in addition to the institutions of higher education, other types of organizations. Maybe you should mention those really quickly.
Sure. Yes, we have businesses that are creating all kinds of things around OpenCourseWare. So we have institutions or organizations that are creating services to help identify and package OpenCourseWare for other institutions as a value-added service. Mm-hmm. We also have a number of businesses that support OpenCourseWare through the membership in the consortium, software companies, for example. We have a very interesting organization in Texas, the city of Manor, Texas, actually. The assistant city manager has found OpenCourseWare to be very interesting and has issued a challenge to his citizens to come up with the OpenCourseWare that they would like to see as a public education program, and he will reward citizens for generating ideas with gift certificates and things from local businesses. So I think we're going to see a municipal government creating OpenCourseWare within the next few months. They have a few planned already. One is on civil society.
Fantastic, fantastic. We have a question coming in from a viewer, Derek Lewis, who's asking how much has been invested in MIT's OpenCourseWare site to date, and how much does it cost to produce a full video course? And I can give the basic numbers, but perhaps Professor Miyagawa, you'd like to comment afterward. MIT OpenCourseWare, to publish the original 1,800 courses, required an investment of around $30 million. 25 million of that came from the Hewlett and Mellon foundations, and 5 million of that came directly from MIT's core budget. The program on an ongoing basis costs us about $3.3 million to operate, about half of which continues to be paid by MIT directly, and the other half we're paying for currently with reserve funds. And we are obviously building a donation program and a corporate sponsorship program that will help sustain us in the long haul once those grant reserves are expended. So that's the basics of our cost structure. The reason why it costs about $3.3 million a year for us to operate the program is because the most valuable resource we have here at MIT really is our faculty time. And in order for this program to be successful, we need to ensure that sharing materials openly does not require an inordinate amount of faculty time, because they do provide their materials voluntarily. They provide their time voluntarily to the program. So we have a staff of about 20 people here at MIT OpenCourseWare that help to collect, format, clear copyright on the materials, and make sure they appear on the web in the format that you see them. In particular, video courses are more expensive for us. It typically takes us about $10,000 a course if you divide it all out. A video course will cost between $25,000 to $35,000 in total. So that's the basic cost structure, but perhaps you'd like to comment a little bit about how the program is financed.
Yeah. So Steve mentioned that about half of the OCW operation is being paid by MIT. Now, originally, this was really not in the plan. And it's important to give the reason why MIT is doing that. As I mentioned earlier, we thought that the biggest beneficiary will be people out there using MIT's teaching materials. But as MIT's OCW became bigger and bigger, it became quite apparent to us that there are many benefits to MIT. I've already mentioned that 80% of the faculty participate in OCW. As a result of participation, the teaching materials have improved because they know that OCW is being viewed by 1 million people. So naturally, the material that they produce will have that audience in mind as well. And so it's been a big benefit to our teaching. Our students, MIT students, view OCW in huge numbers. Something like 90% of the MIT students use OCW for a variety of reasons. You know, what courses to take next, courses that they're taking now, but they need some supplementary material from maybe a previous offering. Many reasons, many creative reasons. Okay, so there are many benefits to MIT, which has been one of the biggest surprises for me. And so MIT is committed to supporting OCW at the level that it's supporting now. But at the same time, it is important that OCW is a huge benefit to the rest of the world. And for that, we need to continue to do campaigns to support OCW.
Great. And one of the things I should also note is that MIT is a much larger scale OpenCourseWare than many of the other OpenCourseWares out there, which are operating on much more modest funding with smaller staff sizes and lower cost structures. So Mary Lou, maybe you could talk a little bit about the size of some of the other OpenCourseWares that are out there, the kind of staffing models they've been using.
The projects that are being produced now run anything from a single staff member to probably 5 or 6 as the next largest after MIT's efforts. And the number of courses can range from anything from a couple up to a few hundred. We're seeing that as institutions adopt this and as they see the internal benefits that were referenced just a minute ago, they tend to invest more in it. And they invest by reallocating their resources, not necessarily adding additional resources to the university's budget. So as students become more savvy in using OpenCourseWare and selecting their courses, universities are beginning to be able to divert some of their advising funds, for example, into efforts like OpenCourseWare. And also, they don't necessarily have to produce as much PR output for things like their distance education program as their profile is raised through being seen in OpenCourseWare. We're also seeing a number of institutions that are adopting a student model where they're having work-study funds actually fund students to come in, learn about copyright, learn how to copyright clear materials, which is very important, and produce the OpenCourseWare on a lower budgetary scale. I think overall, though, it ultimately relies still on a lot of volunteer efforts of faculty. Faculty are very key in producing their materials, getting them ready for OpenCourseWare. And in some schools, the faculty actually get their materials up to a certain level before turning it over for final production. So the models are varying greatly, and it also depends on the kinds of courses they're producing. You're seeing many more video courses that are coming out. There seems to be a great interest of that with this audience as well. So you're seeing institutions that are bringing in their learning technology labs right into the classroom to do those videos up front, and that makes loading them up into OpenCourseWare a whole lot easier.
Great. And I should say, to scale MIT OpenCourseWare against the programs you were talking about, we publish about 200 courses worth of material each year, and probably 3 to 5 video courses as a part of that publication. And so you can see we're an order of magnitude larger than many of the other OpenCourseWares out there. And we are the only one that represents the entire curriculum of a university. We have all 33 of the academic departments here at MIT represented, both undergraduate and graduate. So we have another question from a viewer that was submitted before the video started, from Zachary Wiesner, and he was asking if we could talk about how people, both individuals and groups, make use of the course materials, and if we have any recommendations for how best to do so. So I can give the basics of who uses OpenCourseWare and how. Our audience breaks down between about 9% educators, 42% students at other universities, and 43% of these independent learners that Professor Miyagawa was speaking about. Again, we have about 1 million unique individuals who come to the site each month, about 1.5 million visits. And we've been able to document through surveys a wide range of activities that the site supports. I think when most people think of OpenCourseWare, the first thing that comes to mind is distance learning. But MIT OpenCourseWare really isn't a distance learning site. It's a reference and a resource for undertaking a range of educational activities. All of the materials are licensed openly, which allows our users to download the materials, modify the materials, and reformat the materials for their own needs and redistribute them to other audiences. And so that allows educators to do things like take the lecture notes out of a class, reformat them, and use them in their own classroom. It allows them to look at our curricular structures because we cover all of the academic departments, undergraduate and graduate. For instance, we've talked to an architecture department head in Indonesia who was reformulating how his school teaches architecture. And he wasn't adopting MIT's approach directly, but he was using the site as a reference to look at how MIT thinks about teaching a subject like architecture. What do we teach first? What do we teach second? What do we teach third? Faculty members also use the site around the world as a resource for improving their own knowledge. It is some of the best information in the field for many of the departments that we have here at MIT. And so it allows, especially in resource-poor environments, it allows educators to upgrade their own personal knowledge and expand their own learning. Among students, we find that they use the material to supplement the materials they get from their own faculty members. So if they're struggling with a concept, they need a different explanation, they can come to our site, watch the video, read the relevant lecture notes, and have a second take at the material. Very often they use the site to study beyond their own courses that they're taking so that they can learn about other topics they won't have a chance to study while they're undertaking their formal education. And finally, the site turns out to be very useful both within MIT and outside of MIT as an advising and educational planning tool. It allows students to do things like figure out, do they really want to be in a field like mechanical engineering? What do mechanical engineers do when they get to the graduate level? What kinds of topics do they study? It also allows them to make more granular choices. What course do I want to take next? What can I expect if I'm taking linear algebra? What do the materials look like for a course like that? And it also, especially here at MIT, we've noticed it provides the opportunity for students to flash back and flash forward through the material. So if they're in an intro math class and they want to know where this concept is going to be applied, they can go to the junior aeronautics class where it's actually used. Or if they're in that junior aeronautics class and they've forgotten the formula they were supposed to know, they can go back to the math class and learn it again. So we've certainly seen that. And I think the widest open field that we've seen is this field of independent learners who use the site in a whole range of different ways. About half of the ways we've documented from independent learners are ways that are basically for personal use, for the joy of learning, for homeschooling their children, for doing personal projects. And then the other half that we've documented are really professional uses, where people are either reviewing the basics in their professional field or keeping up with the latest trends in their field, or in some cases trying to solve particular technical problems. So, I mean, that's generally what we know about how people use the site. And so for that reason, it becomes a little bit difficult to give general recommendations on how best to use the materials. It's kind of like asking how best to use the encyclopedia. But I think one thing you can do is on our website in the About Us section, there's a section of OCW stories that document different ways users have accessed the materials and used the materials. And reading those stories might give you some good ideas. But it really depends on whether you're coming at it as an educator, as a student, or as an independent learner. Does anyone else want to comment on that?
Just to add to what Steve just mentioned, I think one decision that we made early on, which has been very helpful, is that we decided to make the teaching materials available with permission of copyright cleared, so that users of OpenCourseWare know that when they are looking at and thinking about using OpenCourseWare material, MIT OpenCourseWare material, they know that that it is free of copyright restriction. We've cleared it, and so long as the use is for a nonprofit purpose, that users are able to take it, copy it, distribute it, alter it, however the educator or the learner wants to use. And I must say that I travel fair amount because of OpenCourseWare, and wherever I go, people tell me, gee, I'm using the linguistics lecture by Professor Richards for my class, or I'm using Walter Lewin's videos for my physics class. This happens all the time.
We have another question coming in from Giuseppe, which is asking, as you probably know, U.S. high school students are impoverished in their math and science skills. Do we have any initiatives to try to push OCW or curriculum with school districts? And so, very briefly, the answer to that is yes, we do have a section of our site, if you look on the left-hand navigation, that's called Highlights for High School. And we launched this in 2007. And while the site does not provide materials that were created specifically for high school students, what it does provide is access to the content on our site that is applicable, that's come out of MIT classrooms, but is nonetheless applicable to advanced placement study of high school math and science topics. And so if you go to that site, what you'll see is a section that's called Test Prep, and there's calculus, biology, and physics subsections. And what they do is they provide the AP catalog of subjects that are studied in high school AP courses. And we had a team of freshmen and also high school seniors go through our site and identify all the small bits of material that were appropriate to high school study of these subjects. And so it provides a very quick index in a way that educators and students can dive into our site and find that material that's appropriate to the high school level. without having to go through every single document or every single video on the site. So for example, if you're interested in oscillations of pendulums, for instance, you can find that in the topic list. You can click on that. It'll take you to the 5-minute video section at the end of Walter Lewin's 15th lecture in his physics course, where before you would have had to gone through all 15 of the lectures to find that one clip that addresses that subject. So it provides a great index. I know that Professor Miyagawa and Mary Lou both speak in and attend meetings around the country where the topic of secondary education comes up. So first, Mary Lou, could you maybe comment on some of the things you've heard about secondary education and how OpenCourseWare might help address the STEM issues?
Sure. And I think, Steve, you mentioned earlier that a lot of foundations are becoming interested in OpenCourseWare. And this is one of the areas that they are really getting interested in, and government policymakers as well. How can OpenCourseWare support not just success in particular subject areas, but success in higher education, improve graduation rates, improve student populations who may not otherwise get higher education? How can it help bridge that gap and help show students that they can be successful? And so we're seeing many more organizations and foundations really interested in pushing that particular question. And we do get a lot of questions about how can OpenCourseWare support students who are currently in particularly the higher grades of secondary education, 11th and 12th in this country, to understand their subject matter better and prepare them to think more independently outside of a more structured high school curriculum. How can they think more independently so that when they go to university and they begin to be confronted with these concepts of critical thinking, they're already versed in that enough that they can continue their interest in science and mathematics, where a lot of freshmen may otherwise be scared off because of the way that things are presented, which is so differently than in a secondary curriculum.
Great, thank you. Professor Miyagawa, did you want to comment on any conversations you've been involved with regarding secondary ed here in the U.S.?
Yeah, one thing that I'm involved in, this is my own project, is a history course that I teach with my colleague, Professor John Dower, here at MIT. And we have created quite a large site called Visualizing Cultures, which is about doing history using visuals. So we have agreements with a variety of museums, Boston MFA, Smithsonian, and so forth. They have agreed to provide images under Creative Commons license to our site. And so we go around and do workshops for secondary school teachers. We are close to about 800 teachers now that we have trained in using this Visualizing Cultures site, which is an OCW site. And one thing that all the teachers tell us is that the world is changing very, very quickly, and yet they have textbooks which are years old. And the advantage to using this kind of material is that they can, first of all, it's free, it's open, and it's very much up to date. And so we have many, many schools around the country using this site.
Great, thank you. Thank you. We have another question from Giuseppe. He's asking, are there any innovative IT solutions that are on the horizon to try to keep costs down? I would say that there are some marginal technological improvements that we're seeing, primarily in capturing video and audio. It's become a lot cheaper to do that. We now at MIT OpenCourseWare support really 2 levels of video capture. One is the standard high quality level that we've been capturing, and then another is sort of a lower quality handheld camera that we give to students to record classroom activities or field trips or things like that. So we tend to do the high quality capture for full video lecture series, and we do the lower quality capture to get other types of material onto the site. But I think typically what you see is technological improvements help us to make the site more rich, to better represent the course materials that are out there, or the course activities that are out there. But the core business that we undertake in gathering faculty materials, preparing them for a site, and putting them up on the web still requires us to gather materials that are created in a wide variety of formats and are at different levels of preparedness for sharing online, and very manually to prep those for going up on our website. So it's very difficult for us to reduce the core costs of that. That is very much a manual activity. Over time, we expect that the faculty members will begin to adopt a more common set of digital tools, and that will allow us to leverage their more common, richer formats. But as long as we're continuing to work with PowerPoints and with Word documents and with PDFs and LaTeX and all the other different formats that we get the content in, and we have to convert those for our site, we haven't found any one silver bullet that's going to help us totally reduce the cost of doing what we're doing. Mary Lou, maybe you could comment on some of the other approaches that schools are taking that they're finding ways to reduce costs using technology.
They are. I think one of the things that you mentioned that is true in other places as well is the video capture. That students, in particular self-learners, are very interested in video lectures or video courses. And so, pardon me, there are a number of projects around the world. There's a big one out of Berkeley that's an OpenCast project that is looking to automatically capture both the speaker and the materials that the speaker is presenting, and begin to edit that in almost real time. So there's someone in the back of the room that can capture the image, adjust it, and then it's ready to go live almost as soon as the class ends. And by doing this in collaboration with a number of institutions and with a number of learning management systems, we're actually seeing that the integration into OpenCourseWare is both more cost-effective and a lot quicker, so that it doesn't take a semester or two after the course ends to actually get those materials live on the site. That's particularly helpful for students in a current semester. If they miss a lecture or if they need reminder about what happened in that course, they can go back to it as a reference in the same semester.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is an interest in multimedia, an interest in the different ways that we're able to represent what goes on in the classroom in the OpenCourseWare space. I think one of the other interesting things is that we're seeing some materials emerge that have never been seen in the digital space before. And Professor Miyagawa, I think some of the materials that you've been able to collect for the Visualizing Culture site that are available through MIT OpenCourseWare are some of the most wonderful materials that we're seeing emerge in the digital space for the first time as part of an OpenCourseWare project. So maybe you could talk a little bit about some of those materials and how you've been able to get access to them.
So having served on the original committee that proposed OpenCourseWare, I wanted to see if we could take advantage of this project to offer a course that would be designed taking advantage of OpenCourseWare. And so I proposed to Professor Dara that we create this history project and course that looks at images as historical text to try to understand history. Not through written text, which is the traditional way of doing history, but through images that we can collect and try to understand history through those images. And as I said, in order to do that, you have to get the images. And so we approached many important institutions: Boston MFA, Smithsonian, Peabody Essex Museum, museums in Japan, museums in England, and we continue to expand that. And at every museum, we explain OpenCourseWare, and we explain that what we need are not just images, but we need images that can be licensed to us under this OpenCourseWare Creative Commons, which allows the user of our site to download, distribute, alter, so long as it's for nonprofit purpose. And I've just been very pleased that so many museums have decided to sign on and have made images which have been basically inaccessible to the public unless you go to the museum. Okay? Or even if you go to the museum, most of the images are stored. that now these images are available in tens of thousands on our site.
Great, thank you. We've got a question coming in from Derek about the popularity of video courses and whether they're, how much more popular they are than the document-only based presentations. We do have metrics on that, Derek. And what we've seen is that the video courses do tend to attract a much larger audience. The top video course probably gets about 60,000 or so visits each month, whereas your typical course with documents might receive about 10,000 or so. But there are a couple of qualifications that I should provide with that. One is that we've intentionally put the video on the most popular courses. So we've looked at the courses that have the heaviest traffic, and we've gone out and we've tried to videotape those courses. And you'll notice that most of the courses that have videotape on our site are introductory level courses that would naturally have large audiences anyways. And the other thing is that the most popular courses on the site are not exclusively video courses, and that there are a number of courses that get similar traffic to the video courses that don't have video associated with them, but instead they have some other rich resource that's very attractive to independent learners. So that might be a textbook or lecture notes that are very, very detailed, or some other kind of a resource, digital resource, that makes it a very attractive site for independent learners. But the other thing about the site is that it really does attract traffic in a very long tail fashion. There are a core group of courses that get the most traffic, and these are the introductory undergraduate courses primarily. And then there are a large group of courses that get relatively modest traffic, and these are the graduate courses. But we think that that long tail traffic is also an important aspect of what we do for a couple of reasons. One is because it presents the full richness of MIT as an institution, what we teach, how we go about teaching things, and that's very useful for educators around the world as they're reformulating their educational programs and using our site as a reference. And the other reason is that while a course that's, say, on sanitation engineering at the graduate level may not be useful to a broad population of people, it may, on the other hand, be useful to a small group of people whose work can have a tremendous impact on the health and well-being of many, many people in their region. And so we like to include not only just the very, very popular courses, but also the courses that are at the higher level and are a little bit more esoteric as well. I don't know if you want to comment on other strategies from other schools, Mary Lou, in terms of including materials that may be less than popular or video, not video, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We're certainly seeing, for the video question, yes, there's wide demand, particularly among self-learners, for video courses. But I think schools are approaching that in a number of different ways. While they are trying to capture the videos for the courses themselves, they're also capturing things like lecture series that they're running on particular topics. So, for example, the University of California at Irvine ran a lecture series on the Supreme Court, and a number of well-known professors lectured on that. It's now one of the more popular package of materials that you can get on their website, more popular than some of their entire courses, which are also video lectured. So part of it does depend on the theme and the topic that you're talking about, but I also believe that a lot of universities are trying to meet the needs of who they think their audiences are. So there's a really interesting project happening with African Virtual University, which was established specifically to address the need of Africans who could not attend a traditional brick and mortar university. They came up with a strategy a couple of years ago to create teacher training materials because in several African countries, teachers are in very short demand, or very short supply and very high demand, particularly well-trained teachers. And a lot of the distance education materials that were available for African Virtual University to use were coming from Europe and the United States, where the context is completely different. So what they decided to do was to bring together 12 institutions from 10 different countries to create teaching materials specifically for the African context in 3 languages, so in French, in English, and in Portuguese. And they did that with the outcome that it would become OpenCourseWare, so that this becomes a resource for the entire continent. And even though these materials are not video-based, they're very popular, and they stand to actually have huge effect. And they did this for a particular need that they felt rather than popularity.
Great, thank you. We have a comment coming in from Derek. This really isn't a question, but he writes, what you've pioneered is one of the most wonderful developments in education world history. And I just wanted to thank Derek for the comment and also to mention that these kinds of messages, these support messages that we get are very, very important to us here at MIT OpenCourseWare. We pass them along to the faculty that we work with who are donating their materials and make sure that they understand the gratitude that people feel worldwide. We receive 30 or 40 emails a day from users out there who thank us or give us suggestions. Obviously, we have supporters around the world who help us financially, and this is a vital part of what we do. Without that outside input, we would not be able to continue to maintain the level of enthusiasm we have among the faculty and the level of effort that we're able to put forward with our staff in capturing the content for the site. So thank you for that comment. Keep the good comments coming, and we'll continue to pass them on to the MIT faculty who really deserve your thanks. So with that, I think we'd like to wrap up. I'll give each one of our panelists an opportunity to share maybe some closing thoughts. I want to personally thank all of you for joining us on the webcast today. So first, Mary Lou, do you have any closing comments?
Sure. I wanted to just echo what Professor Miyagawa said earlier, to thank you as a community, as a worldwide audience for these materials and supporters of OpenCourseWare, for your support for attending the webcast today, but also, moreover, for your general interest and your enthusiasm in promoting OpenCourseWare to the rest of the world. And MIT has something to be extremely proud of, that you've started a movement that has obviously caught on in ways I think that no one imagined 10 years ago. Not just with universities, not just with learners, not just with faculty, but with governments. People are realizing the powerful idea of sharing and rediscovering that by opening yourself up, you actually strengthen yourself. So MIT, once again, has become a pioneer in higher education, and the rest of the world thanks you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Professor Miyagawa?
Thank you, thank you, Derek. I just want to reiterate what I said at the beginning, that the MIT OpenCourseWare is an effort. It's a project of the entire MIT community. And it really speaks, I think, highly of this community that so many people are participating now. And that number keeps increasing. And now we're going beyond MIT. And you are very much part of the community with your interest and with your support. And I just want to thank you for your generosity in supporting OpenCourseWare.
Great, thank you. And thank you once more for joining us for the webcast. I realize there may be some questions that we didn't get a chance to answer during our live time here, but if you send us those questions in email, or we'll look through the comments that we've received on the web, we'll make sure that we get back to you with answers to those questions. So once again, for all of us, thank you for joining us on this webcast.